My son-in-law pressed my daughter back into her chair in the middle of her sentence, and the sound she made was not loud enough for anyone at a nearby table to call it anything. His mother smiled and said something about Thea always loving an audience. I was sitting 4 feet away. I did not stand up. I did not raise my voice. I did not do the thing every part of me was demanding to do. If you stopped this story right there, you'd probably say I failed her. And if you'd asked me that same question 20 years ago, I'd have agreed with you. But I spent 28 years with the Ontario Provincial Police teaching myself one rule above everything else, and it is this. The moment you react instead of document, you've handed the case to the other side. So I picked up my phone, and what happened in the 3 weeks after that is what I want to tell you today. My name is Neil Carver. I'm 64 years old and I live in Kingston, Ontario, in a townhouse on the West End that my wife June and I bought in 2001. June died 26 months ago, pancreatic cancer. She was 61. It moved fast and we didn't have time to argue with it, which is the part I'm still not at peace with and don't expect to be. I retired from the OPP 14 months after she died. Commercial crime unit out of the Kingston detachment. 28 years, fraud, forgery, financial crimes, not glamorous work, not television work. Mostly it's paper, bank records, incorporation documents, transaction histories. You sit with paper until the truth in it becomes obvious, and then you hand it to the Crown and you let the process do what the process does. I have one daughter, Thea. She's 30 years old and she has June's stubbornness and her mother's laugh, and a way of tilting her head when she's deciding whether to argue with you that June had too, which still stops me cold sometimes when I see it. She's a registered nurse at Kingston Health Sciences Center, oncology ward. She has been doing that work since she was 24, and she does not talk about it much, but I know what it costs her, and I have never once heard her complain. She married Wade Prentiss 3 years ago. He runs an electrical contracting company out of Kingston, Prentiss Electrical. 6 employees, decent contracts, licensed with the Electrical Safety Authority of Ontario. I did my due diligence the way I always do, and I want to be fair. On paper he was solid. Good trade skills, clean record. His handshake was the kind a man uses to establish something, but I told myself I was reading too much into it. I was being generous. That is a habit I've had to re-examine. His mother is Harriet Prentiss. 61, lives in the East End of Kingston. She runs a licensed home daycare out of her house on Division Street called Sunshine Steps. 11 children enrolled. She has been doing it for 16 years. She's the kind of woman who fills a room by deciding to fill it. And she has opinions about everything, with the confidence of someone whose opinions have never been seriously challenged. The occasion was a retirement lunch, the last Tuesday in January, my celebration which Thea had organized, and which she kept small because she knew I'd have been uncomfortable with anything bigger. The 4 of us at a restaurant on Princess Street downtown, white tablecloths, good bread, the kind of place that's been there long enough that the staff know the regulars by their drink orders. It was -17 outside, and the windows were fogged at the edges, and it felt like exactly the kind of afternoon you'd want to be inside somewhere warm with people you love. I want to describe what happened over the next 11 minutes carefully, because I've gone back over it the way I used to go back over interview footage. Thea had written something, a piece of paper folded in her jacket pocket. When the water glasses were full, she took it out and started to unfold it. She said, "I want to say a few things about my dad," and she was smiling and nervous the way she gets when she cares about something very much. And her voice was already a little unsteady, in a way that told me she'd been working on this for a while. She got through 1 sentence, maybe 1.5. Wade reached over without looking at her and put his hand on her shoulder. Not affectionately, he pressed down, not hard enough to leave a mark, just hard enough to stop her. He said, "Sit down, Thea, nobody needs a speech." Quiet, flat. The voice of somebody who has said this before, many times, and has never once needed to raise it to get the result he wanted. She made a sound, small, involuntary, a breath caught and compressed and swallowed. Not pain exactly, or not only pain. The sound of somebody who has spent a long time learning to make very small sounds. I have heard that sound in interview rooms. I have heard it from people who have been managing someone else's moods for so long that managing their own reaction has become automatic. She sat down. She put the paper back in her pocket. Her eyes went wet for about 1.5 seconds, and then she pulled it back, the way you pull a window shut. Harriet Prentiss set her wine glass down and smiled across the table at nothing in particular, and said, "She does love an audience. Conversational, easy, as if she were commenting on the soup." There were 9 other people in my sightline. A couple at the table behind Thea, a woman eating alone with a book, a family of 4, 2 parents and 2 teenagers, one of whom had already looked up from his phone. A server who had paused at the station near the wall with a coffee carafe she'd forgotten she was holding. 9 people. I counted them afterward because that's the job, and you cannot turn it off. I want to be honest with you about the 4 seconds that followed, because I've been in enough interview rooms to know that the clean version of a story is never the true one. I was not calm. I have sat across a table from a man who moved $2 million through shell accounts and destroyed 3 families, and I kept my voice level for 90 minutes. I have delivered death notifications and I have not broken. I have never in my life felt what I felt in that restaurant. My hands were flat on the table and the stillness of them was doing an enormous amount of work. I could feel my own pulse. I could feel the back of my jaw. And underneath all of it, one sentence, in my own voice, the voice I used with younger investigators who were about to make a mistake. Don't react until you know what you have. Because here is what 28 years teaches you, and I need you to actually hear this part because everything that follows depends on it. The angriest person in the room is never the most dangerous one. He is the most available one. If I stand up, I'm a 64-year-old retired cop putting hands on somebody in a restaurant. Now there are 2 incidents. Now the story is about me. And every witness in that room revises what they saw, because that is what witnesses do. And Wade Prentiss walks out with a narrative where the father-in-law attacked him. And Thea goes home with him that night into whatever comes after that. I have seen that exact sequence destroy families, not once, more times than I want to count. So I did not stand up. I put my hand into my jacket pocket and took out my phone and opened the camera and pressed record and set it on the table next to my water glass, angled toward the 2 of them. Casual as a set of car keys. Neither of them registered it. People who are certain they are in the right don't check. I let it run 44 seconds. His hand on her shoulder for the first 9. Her face, the paper going back into her pocket. Harriet in frame, wine glass going back down, still smiling. The light in that restaurant is warm. It is not flattering, every bit of it was clear. Then I picked up my napkin, set it beside my plate and said, I think we'll call it here, quietly, not a question. Wade said we hadn't had dessert. I said, Thea, get your coat. She looked at him, she looked at Harriet, she looked at me, and something in my face, I was not managing it by then, made her reach for her coat. I paid the bill, all 4 of us. I said, thank you both for coming to Wade and Harriet with the tone I used when I was concluding an interview that had gone the way I needed it to go. Then I put my hand on Thea's back and walked her out of that restaurant and up Princess Street to my truck. She was shaking. I was not. That comes later for me. It came at about 2 in the morning, standing at my kitchen sink, and it lasted 90 seconds and nobody saw it. We sat in the truck with the heat running. She didn't say anything for a few minutes. Then she said, Dad, please don't do anything. I said, already did something. She said, what do you mean? I said, I have 44 seconds of video, his hand on your shoulder. Harriet's commentary, your face. Pause. Thea, has he done that before? She looked out the window at the people going in and out of the shops on Princess Street. A January Tuesday, people with their collars up against the cold. A woman with a toque pulled down over her ears, bags from the market. Everything perfectly ordinary, she said. Not like that. Not exactly like that. I have taken a lot of statements. I know that answer. It is the answer of somebody who has been sorting incidents into acceptable and unacceptable for long enough that the categories themselves have shifted, quietly, without them noticing. I said, how long has something been going on? Silence. Thea. She said to the window, about 20 months. She told me it wasn't always physical. Mostly it was that he tracked her location on her phone, and had quiet reasons for every time she was somewhere he hadn't known about in advance. He went through her messages. He managed their joint account, his card, not hers, and he reviewed every transaction. If she bought something he hadn't agreed to, there was a conversation afterward that could go on for hours. The physical part had been 4 times. She stopped, and I watched my daughter count on her fingers in the dark cab of my truck. 4 times somebody had put hands on my kid and she hadn't told me. And then I asked the question I had to ask, even knowing the answer might land hard. I said, why didn't you tell me? And she said, because of your heart thing, Dad. 18 months ago, I know you. I know exactly what you would have done, and I could not be the reason you had another one. I need you to sit with that with me for a moment. 18 months ago, I had what my cardiologist calls a significant cardiac event. I was fine. I am fine. I walk every morning along the waterfront path, and my last 3 checkups have been unremarkable. But Thea had been carrying 20 months of this alone, in the dark, because she had decided that the man who spent nearly 3 decades building airtight cases was too fragile to hear the truth about his own daughter's marriage. She was not protecting Wade. She was not protecting herself. She was protecting me from whatever I would have become if she'd told me too soon. I have thought about that every single day since. I didn't say any of it in the truck. I put my hand over hers and said, "Okay, here's what happens now. You're coming to the house tonight. In the morning I make some calls. You don't have to decide anything yet. Just let me work." She said, "I don't want this to turn into something." I said, "Thea, he put his hands on you in front of 9 people, and his mother told the table you were being dramatic. It's already something." She gave me one small nod. The nod of somebody who has been very tired for a very long time, and has only just been given permission to notice it. She fell asleep on my couch that night under the blanket June's sister made. I sat at the kitchen table and watched that video 4 times. I had what I thought I had. Then I made 2 calls. The first was to Carl Bettridge. Carl was my partner for 11 of my 28 years, retired now and doing private investigation work out of an office on Bath Road. He picked up on the second ring. I told him what I had. Long pause. He said, "How clean is it?" I told him. Another pause. Then he said, "Neil, that is the whole thing right there. Don't do anything stupid between now and 9 a.m. I told him I hadn't. He said, "I know, but I'm saying it anyway." Then Denise Okafor, family law, Princess Street. Call her before 9. He needs to not have spoken to his own lawyer yet. I told him I was already thinking that. He said, "You didn't touch him." I said I didn't need to. He said, "That is everything. Keep it that way." The second call was to Denise Okafor's after-hours line. 15 years in family law, called to the Ontario bar in 2009. She picked up. I gave her the short version. She said, "Which restaurant?" I told her. She said, "They'll have cameras, Princess Street, at that price point, definitely 2 at minimum." She was right. She said, 8:30 my office. Bring the original phone, not a copy. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to Thea breathe in the next room and started a list on a legal pad. Because here is how you actually build a case, and it is nothing like what people imagine. You don't do it with a speech or a confrontation. You do it document by document, fact by fact, until the structure is solid enough that there is no door left on the other side to walk through. Wade Prentiss went to bed that Tuesday night believing he'd ended an awkward lunch. He thought Wednesday he'd be back on a job site in Cataraqui. He thought Harriet would call Thea by the weekend and smooth it over, the way she always had. He was wrong on all 3. Wednesday morning I was in Denise's office at 8:30. She confirmed the restaurant ran 2 cameras and confirmed that a public dining room in Ontario carries no expectation of privacy. My video was clean. She watched it twice, made no expression the first time, and on the second pass stopped on Harriet's face mid-smile and looked at me over her reading glasses. She said, "Mr. Carver, in 15 years of family law I have never once had the enabling parent on video. The perpetrator, yes. The parent endorsing it, never." She started writing. Emergency motion under the Family Law Act. A statement to Kingston Police that afternoon while the restaurant confirmed the footage was still held. Then she stopped and said, "What does he do for work?" I told her. Licensed electrical contractor, ISA registered WSIB account in good standing. Contracts with 2 commercial developers in the Kingston area. She wrote for a moment. "And the mother?" I said she ran a licensed home daycare, 11 children. Licensed through the Ministry of Education, Ontario. Denise Okafor set her pen down. She said, "She is a licensed home daycare operator responsible for the daily care of 11 children. And she is on video encouraging a man to physically restrain a woman and then mocking that woman publicly in a restaurant." She looked at me steadily. "That is not a suggestion. That is a mandatory fitness referral to the ministry." I sat in that office and thought about Harriet Prentiss at her kitchen table in the east end of this city. 11 families trusting her with their children every single morning. I gave my statement to Kingston Police that afternoon. The officer was thorough, watched the video twice, filled out every line with the kind of care that told me somebody had trained her right. She said, "You have a law enforcement background, sir," I told her. She said, "This is about as clean a complaint as we receive. Public location, multiple witnesses, documentation, independent camera angle available. Are you requesting charges?" I said I was requesting that the process run its course, whatever that produced. Thursday morning I made Thea breakfast. Eggs, toast, and the orange juice she has liked cold since she was 7. We sat for 2 hours and I did not push her once. She showed me her phone. 18 months of messages she had never deleted. The apologies that read like instructions. The affection that arrived precisely when she had started to pull away, calibrated like a thermostat being adjusted. The texts that said "I love you but you made me," which is the same sentence in every language and every relationship where it has ever been sent. I photographed every screen. She had 3 photographs she had taken herself in the bathroom at work, of marks on her arm and once on her collarbone. She had kept them in a phone folder labeled receipts, which is the most heartbreaking filing system I have ever encountered, and I have encountered some filing systems in my time. I asked her why he did it at the restaurant, in public at a table with witnesses. She thought about it for a long time. Then she said because his mother was there. She's the only audience that matters to him. I've held on to that word since, audience. She asked me if any of it would actually work. I poured her more juice and said, yes, but I need to say something once and only once. None of this holds if you go back to him. She looked at me. I said, I can build you a way out. Every piece of it, solid. I cannot walk you through it. That part is yours. She was quiet for a while. Then she said, Mom never trusted him. I said, your mother had better instincts than anyone I ever worked alongside. And she never said it out loud because she thought you'd dig in if she pushed. Thea said she was probably right about that. And then she laughed a little. It wasn't a good laugh, but it was the first one in 4 days. If you've been with me this far and you want more of these, hit subscribe. It's free, and it's the only reason I keep going. In the 11 days that followed, everything moved in sequence the way a good case moves when the documentation is sound. Kingston police pulled the restaurant footage. 2 cameras. One of them had a clear angle from near the host stand. His hand on her shoulder, the paper going back into her pocket, Harriet's face, the whole sequence from an angle I had nothing to do with securing. A charge was laid under the criminal code. Wade turned himself in through his lawyer. He was processed and released the same day. I want to be clear about that. It is not prison. It is an arrest, a charge, and a permanent record. And in the trades, a record like that gets noticed by the people who issue contracts. The Electrical Safety Authority of Ontario received a referral regarding a licensed contractor under an active criminal charge. Their review process opened. These things move slowly in Ontario, and I knew that going in, but the flag on file is what matters. A Ministry of Education early years inspector arrived at Sunshine Steps. They reviewed the complaint and the video included in the referral. They contacted the restaurant and confirmed that employees had witnessed the incident. Letters went to the families of 11 children informing them the facility was under a fitness review, and that they had the right to request information. 5 of those 11 families withdrew their children within 2 weeks. I found out because one of the mothers, a woman I'd never met, whose daughter had been at Sunshine Steps for 3 years, posted about it in a Kingston neighborhood group. And in a city this size, a post like that travels the way posts about Jock Hardy Arena or a Tim Hortons closing travel, which is to say fast and to everyone. Harriet called Thea 6 times during those weeks. Thea answered none of them. On the last call, Harriet left a voicemail that Thea played for me once and then deleted, which I told her was exactly the right decision. It was nearly 5 minutes long. It said my name several times in a specific tone. It did not say I'm sorry once, but there was one part I've been unable to put down. She said, I raised that boy with nothing. No help, no support, nothing from anyone. You don't do that in this country alone without getting hard. And nobody has ever once thanked me for staying hard when it would have been easier to fall apart. And I have to be fair about this. It cost me something to do it, and I'm going to do it anyway. That woman did raise Wade on her own. She built a small business out of her spare bedroom and kept 11 families trusting her with their children for 16 years. In her own head, she has never been cruel a single day of her life. She has been strong in the only way she was ever taught to be strong. And she believed, somewhere underneath everything, that she was teaching my daughter how a marriage actually works. You hold the line. You don't perform in public. You endure. She was wrong. She was wrong in a way that hurt my daughter for 20 months. She was wrong in a way that cost her half her enrollment. And the reputation she spent 16 years building in a neighborhood where she knew every family by name. But she is not a monster. She is something more common and much harder to name. A person handing down the only tools she was ever given, and never once stopping to ask whether those tools should be passed on at all. Her son is the same. This is the part I still come back to. Wade grew up watching his mother manage everything alone with nothing, and he told Thea more than once that he admired strength above everything else. In his own accounting, he was a strong man. He didn't yell. He didn't lose control. He corrected quietly, with his hands, in ways he had categorized as something different from what they were. Through his lawyer, during the settlement discussions, he made a point, and I'm giving you the substance rather than a quote, that he had never struck her. He offered it the way a man offers something he believes is a defense. And I understood something right then that I hadn't before. There is a scorecard in that man's head, and he will always be winning on it, and no court order in this province will ever change the number he sees when he looks at it. Denise filed Thea's separation application under the Ontario Family Law Act in the second week of February. Wade's lawyer came back aggressive at first. Then Denise sent the full package, the video, the restaurant's 2 camera angles, the Kingston police report, and the criminal charge, 18 months of messages, 3 photographs from a hospital bathroom, and a chronology that Thea and I built together over 4 mornings at my kitchen table. Dates, descriptions, her words, which took a great deal out of her, and which she did anyway every morning, because she is her mother's daughter. Wade's lawyer went quiet after that. I have heard that particular silence before. It's the sound of someone reading the other side's brief and realizing the foundation isn't where they need it to be. Settled in 9 days, uncontested. Equalization payment under Ontario family property law. Thea kept the condo. Her name had always been on the lease. Wade took his truck, his tools, and the recliner he'd brought in from storage. Permanent restraining order replacing the emergency one. No children. No contested hearing. Denise called me the morning it was filed. She said, "It's done, Neil. Complete." I was in my kitchen, coffee going. February light in Kingston, which comes in flat and gray and cold, but which had that morning a particular quality I can't quite describe. She said, "You built this entire case without laying a hand on anyone." And I said, "I didn't build it. I just didn't step on it." That afternoon Thea came over. She brought a bottle of Riesling from the LCBO on Johnson Street, which is something she gets from June's side. And she brought something else. June's bread knife. The good German one with the wooden handle that June bought at a kitchen store on Princess Street in 2004. And that Thea had taken when she got married, and that I hadn't seen in 3 years. She set it on my kitchen counter and said, "This lives here now." We made soup badly and drank most of the wine and talked about nothing that mattered for 3 hours. Her work. Where she was thinking of moving in the spring. Whether the Senators had any real hope this season, which I said probably not. And she said I always said that. And I said that was because I was usually right. At some point she looked at me across the table and said, "Dad, in the truck that day, you could have gone back in there." I said I could have. She said, "Why didn't you?" I told her what I've been telling you, but shorter. If I'd gone back in there, this whole thing becomes a story about me. Retired cop loses it on Princess Street. That's the headline. That's what he tells his lawyer, his mother, every person he knows. And then he has a narrative, and you go home with him and you carry what comes next alone the way you carried the 20 months before it. I said, "I wasn't calm, Thea. Let's not pretend I was calm. I was staying useful. There's a difference. And that difference is the only reason you're sitting in my kitchen right now." She thought about that for a while. Then she said, "Is that the investigator thing?" I said, "That's the investigator thing." So here is what I've been sitting with since January, and it is not the thing people expect me to say. The lesson is not stay calm. Telling an angry parent to stay calm has never worked once in the history of the world, and I was not calm. The real lesson is that anger is information, not a plan. It tells you something is wrong. What you do with that information is the only part that matters. The question I ran in those 4 seconds at the restaurant was not whether I was angry. The question was whether the thing I was about to do made the person I loved safer in 6 weeks. Or just made me feel better in the next 6 seconds. 6 seconds or 6 weeks. That's the whole calculation. It's available to everyone and it costs nothing. And I have never once regretted running it. And the other lesson, the one I got wrong for 30 years, and that I would trade every case I ever closed to have back. My daughter didn't come to me because she thought I would break under the weight of it. Because somewhere along the way, without knowing I was doing it, I taught her that I was the man who handles things. And she heard that as, "Don't hand him anything he can't handle without the handling destroying him." She wasn't protecting Wade. She was protecting me, a 64-year-old retired detective, from himself. So the one thing I'd actually ask you to do this week is small and it will feel strange. Find the person in your life who thinks of you as the strong one. Your kid, your sister, your oldest friend, whoever it is. And tell them, in plain words, out loud, "Whatever it is, you can bring it to me, and I promise you I will not go off." Say that second part. Out loud. Because that is the part that matters. Most people don't stay silent because they don't trust you. They stay silent because they're afraid of what caring will make you do. The question I sit with now, on the mornings I walk the waterfront path in Kingston when the ice is just starting to come in off the lake, is this. Who in my life is quietly protecting me from myself, and how long have they been doing it? If any part of this sounded like your house, if the part about sorting things into acceptable and unacceptable made something tighten in your chest, that is worth taking seriously. In Canada, you can reach the Assaulted Women's Helpline at 1-866-863-0511, and they are there at 3 in the morning. You don't need to have a plan. You don't need to be ready to leave. You are allowed to just ask a question. Comment 1 if you think I did the right thing reaching for my phone instead of standing up. Comment 2 if you think a man who sits still while someone puts hands on his daughter has failed her, no matter how it turns out afterward. And comment 3 if you think the daycare complaint was a step further than protecting Thea. Further into something else. I go back and forth on 3 myself, honestly. Tell me. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. And if you've ever had to hold completely still while somebody you love got hurt, because moving would have made it worse for them. Not you. Tell me what you did with it afterward. Because I'm still working on that part, and I could use the company.